to regular session at 7:03 PM. Get a roll call, please, Ms. Johnson?
Yes. Trustee Ojibwe?
Here.
Trustee Salahudin?
Here.
Trustee Garrett?
Present.
Vice President Lee?
Here.
President Tejada?
Here.
Student Trustee Uazima?
Here.
And Student Trustee Abuzaraya?
Here.
Are there any changes to the agenda, Ms. President? Can we get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The approval of minutes. Board meeting minutes of September 14th.
Move to approve.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting minutes of September 21st.
Move to approve.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nothing to report out of closed session. And so now we're on to the communications, the board report. We'll start with Mr. Abuzaraya from Westmore.
Class, a group of students got together and wrote letters for each teacher, and we delivered them today. So, other than that, I think that's all I have to report.
Bassano, Terranova.
Yeah, so, I mean, last week we had Club Fair, which went really well. Last week we had a Club Fair, and then it went well. So a lot of our clubs got started, and there's a lot of the lower classmen are, like, really into it, so that's cool. And then our counselors set up meetings with the seniors, starting last week, I believe. So they've been calling in seniors during classes to talk about, like, colleges and stuff, and which has been helpful because, like, I got called in, so that was nice. And then there was, like, there was an issue with, like, someone brought up with Samtrans. I don't know if, like, but it was with, like, wait, I have a note on it that someone told me to talk about. It was with the Samtrans bus, like the 49. They said that they eliminated the 16, so they combined both of them, but now that there's, like, both combined, there isn't enough space. Or, like, it's just, like, a lot of the students feel crowded and, like, some of them feel kind of, like, uncomfortable. But they said that when there's the bus that, it's, like, they said it's called the articulated bus, where it has the, like, little, like, thingy.
Accordion type section.
Yeah, that one, that bus works well, but they don't get it, like, often. So they said that, like, when they had that bus, like, everyone was, like, spaced out, but when they didn't have that bus, like, everyone's kind of bunched together. But yeah, that was what someone reported, and that's it.
Mr. Ochapinti?
Yeah, it's always good to hear from the new challenges and things going on in our schools, so thank you for that, student trustees. So it's been a very eventful fall so far. Of course, we all know there are new vaccination guidelines. Encourage, of course, students and families to look to the district for more information and following up on the news, which I'm sure we're all seeing every day, and of course with our director, Michelle Jones. We had a meeting at the Daly City Council last Monday to decide or to actually review some of the current status of the school district property here at San Juan del Rey, as well as, of course, the fate of everything around that. And so it's good to hear community attend the meeting and speak up and have an opportunity to share their voice and to see that we have a continuance for that. And so in terms of, supporting or opposing what's going on, I would encourage community to speak up. Personally, of course, I think, in the interest of our schools and long-term interest of our school district, looking at things like Westmore Park and preserving that in our green spaces, and of course, thinking critically about how we approach urban planning and sustainable development in our communities is really important. And with respect to climate change and a lot of what we're seeing around climate justice, including a lot of our students in the Bay Area who protested last week downtown, just encouraging our community to think critically about these issues and show up and be a part of that process, because we have another month until that next meeting. So essentially, what would have been decided last Monday has been extended to October 25th, is a Monday night meeting, and information can be found online with the City of Daly City. So I'll encourage the public to take this time, though I don't think it's an appropriate time or enough time. It's the most we got right now, and it's a current issue. So please consider getting involved and feel free to speak your voice. It does matter. On top of that, I think it's important to recognize, too, that today we have some presentations, ethnic studies being one of them. Of course, it is still Latinx or Hispanic Heritage Month, and of course also Filipinx Heritage Month. Of course, next month being Native American Heritage Month, and accordingly, we have Heritage Months throughout the year, but every day is a day to celebrate and learn about these things. So it is really empowering to see that we have people talking about ethnic studies today and having a presentation later, and where our district will pursue that and expand that. Me personally, I know I benefited a lot from ethnic studies as a college student, especially with professors and fellow students, and learning and working around people who work with legacy civil rights movement, from the United Farm Workers to the Black Panther Party, and of course the American Indian movement and Asian American movement throughout the state and of course the nation. So feeling as somebody who proudly received that education. One of the things I like looking forward to is how we can pass on and expand that in our own district, in the Bay Area especially. And so I'm looking forward to that discussion tonight. And with that, we'll use the rest of my time.
Salahuddin?
Thank you. So we had our student advisory and student trustee meeting yesterday, and those are in person moving forward. And so that's been really nice to kind of be in the same room with the students. I feel like we have a better connection than we did just those couple of meetings than we did all of last year over Zoom. And so that just kind of leads me into World Teacher Day and still having a lot of gratitude for all of our educational staff here in the JUHSD for what they did last year, because me just having to do one student meeting every other week over Zoom and trying to connect and engage was super hard. And I can't imagine having to try to do that every single day last year. So I just want to continue to express my gratitude to everybody that works in our school district, and just that little piece of it really helped increase my empathy for everything that took place in the prior year. I will also say, too, that I am internally grateful for Tina Van Raphorst. She's kind of amazing. She does an insane amount of work as just our CBO, and all the work that she's done in continually pushing through the development project that the entire board voted for, and ensuring that we have an ongoing source of revenue to support the teachers and staff that we are celebrating today, is inspirational to me. I'm extremely proud. It makes me be so proud to be a part of this district. And I am excited to continue to try to make that project happen, because I believe that is, it was done in a way that is inclusive of the environment. It doubles the amount of green space that we're going to have in this property. It builds much needed housing. As I've said previously, I almost had to leave the district myself. I had the lease to move to Tracy. I was supposed to be board president this year for another year, and that's the reason why, because I was pretty confident I was leaving. And so I had talked to Rosie, and she took my spot. Is I couldn't find market rate housing here. It was impossible to find market rate housing. I am by no means poor. I can afford to pay the full amount of rent, but because every market rate house that I went to, and we're talking houses that are around $3,500 range, had 10 people minimum on the day that I was there visiting. And so people could be extremely discriminatory and prejudicial in the way that they were deciding who can move into their home. And this was in the middle of the pandemic. I can't imagine what it's like now. So I was thinking, pandemic, it's going to be less people looking. Completely wrong. And so people would flat out tell me, we don't want to rent to a single parent. Like, on paper, they would be excited, and then when they would dive deeper and see me in person, they would say, we would prefer to rent to a two-income household. And they could say that because there was plenty of two-income households. So there's a lack of market rate housing in this city, and I'm hoping that we can be a part of that solution while doubling the amount of green space, increasing the amount of trees, providing hiking spaces, another affordable housing development, and space for a child care center. So I think that we did a very good job in working on that neighborhood, and I'm super proud. And the last thing is, I was asked to come and speak this weekend at a memorial for Chinedu Okobi that took place on Sunday. It's been 3 years since he was murdered at the hands of the county sheriff's office. And nothing happened, and all of those officers are still working. So his family was there, and they all said it was really nice that people just still say his name. And so when we talk about George Floyd and other people that whose lives were taken by the hands of law enforcement in other areas, we also need to talk about the people that have died here. And so, you know, it's really heartbreaking to me that after Chinedu Okobi, we had Roger Allen and still no action was taken. So I'm hoping that, you know, we're having these discussions about ethnic studies today, and to talk about the history of what's happened to people of color in this country and how that history is manifesting itself today in different ways. So I'm excited that we're having that ethnic studies discussion, and that's all I have to say today.
I think it should be Happy World Teachers and staff every day, right? Because not just the teachers are here to serve our students, but all staff as well. So we appreciate you all. And absolutely, we should not just appreciate you just today. We should appreciate you every day. So we thank you for all that you do, and we appreciate you every day. And I think that's, you know, the main reason why we're here, to make sure that you get all the tools and the livable wages that you can to be here and support all our amazing students, as you wonderful teachers are here to educate them all. So thank you for that. I just want to say real quick, I saw the board report over the weekend, and it was really nice to see all the changes that have been made in the food service department and all the great food that are being produced, given the student voices saying that they would like some better and healthier options. So I'd just like to thank you to the food service department for making those positive changes, and the food looks great. So thank you.
Ms. Shirley?
I completely agree with my colleagues with regards to their comments for World Teacher Day. So thank you again to all the staff for all the work you've done, and it's something I will continue to be an advocate to make sure we can find creative solutions to increase salaries and to take care of you the way you take care of our students. The one thing I do want to point out, later in consent, we will be approving some new courses over at Jefferson High School, which quite frankly blow my mind. And can board members audit these courses, because these look amazing. Come on, hip hop culture, poetry, songwriting, and performance, course of study, examining diversity through media, and social justice movements. I mean, these are amazing topics, and on a night that we're talking ethnic studies, but with everything going on in our society today, these are incredible courses. So kudos to everybody involved, the teachers who came up with these ideas, the administration providing the space for it. This is incredible stuff, and I would be so excited if I were a student at that school right now, knowing what's coming down the road. And I might just sneak into some of these classes, just saying.
So my daughter is taking 2 of those classes. She's really excited about it. Social justice movements, examining diversity through media study. She also is taking yoga because wellness matters. And although she says it's still really hard. So World Teacher Day, I just want to thank all of our educational staff. You do the heavy lift every day, and especially during COVID, that was I was with my daughter every day when she was on Zoom, and our student advisory council, I don't know how, we got through, we kept the council going, and even though you spent all day on the computer, you still were on in our meetings from 6 to 8, sometimes longer, to keep our council going. And so when we had our meeting last night in person, it's always so good to see the conversations and sometimes the venting, because they need each other, and it's, and it helps us too. But and I am also excited about the ethics studies presentation. I have family members who were farm workers in Delano. So, and of course, my father, throughout his whole life, faced discrimination. He got passed over for promotions constantly, and he was not protected. He worked for the government, so he was not protected by a union. They passed him over, and constantly, and I remember one day he brought home someone from the ship, he worked on a Navy ship, that he trained to take his job. That should have been his job. And this happened to him for 30 years, and then he finally was promoted. So, that is, it hits hard for me. And so I'm just glad that we're going to bring this to all of our students and our faculty. I do want to acknowledge that I went to a very special commemoration, the naming of Bob Lottie Field, and it was so fun. He is a pistol. I think he was going to start coaching. I mean, he was most at home. He was most at home. He was ready with his speech, but the PA system wasn't working, and I thought he was going to run up those stairs and give his speech anyway, but he was most at home shaking hands with the players. It was beautiful, and I just felt so honored, because I remember I graduated from Jeff 40 years ago, and he was a force to be reckoned with then. And when I found out that Ms. Besuino was Bob Lottie's daughter, I went, wow, what, we're so lucky to have you. So I want to thank him for that. So that's all I have to report. I'm sorry. Ms. Presta?
Okay. Thank you. So I just want to say that I went to the Jefferson Council PTA meeting this past week. It happens every year, the principals and presidents meeting. And with other folks in the room, and Mr. Ahrens, Ms. Emmendorfer was there. The Jefferson Elementary School District PTAs have this organization is all of the Jefferson PTAs, so Jefferson Elementary School District and Jefferson Union High School District. And at this particular meeting, it's always really nice because all of the principals and the PTA presidents give updates about their own school. So it's a really nice way for us to kind of have that articulation with one of our partner districts, and it was really nice. I also attended the Brisbane Day in the Park this past Saturday. Mr. Warden did a bang-up job on our table. It was really lovely. It was really beautiful. And there were lots of people visiting. We saw Jessica Tia when I was there as a teacher at Westmore. Our dogs bonded. And it was a really nice day. And it just makes me, because I used to be superintendent in Brisbane and in Bayshore School District, it makes me really happy to see our school district really reaching out and making sure that we are including them and, making information about our school district known to them. So, and the main idea there is just so that kids, 8th graders or younger kids, can come over and learn about the different high schools in the district. And at the table, Mr. Warden had lots of information about the JUHSD High School Fair. It is happening, just to mention it again, October 13th here in the Galleria from 6:30 to 8. I really encourage 8th graders, 6th graders on up, really whoever wants to come, but I encourage students to come and it's a nice way to get an idea about the different schools so that you can decide which schools you want to go and visit and shadow and that kind of thing before kids make decisions on where they're going to go next year. And then finally, on Mondays, I get out to schools throughout the week, but I really try to focus on Mondays, spending a lot of my day in high schools. And so I was at Oceana with Miss Casey on our weekly visits with the schools, and that was great. I also had the chance to visit Heike Menzel's Mission Fusion PE class. I think it was a PE class where she had guest teachers doing African dance and percussion. And I am telling you, it was fabulous. I was pretty impressed. Miss Emmendorfer was dancing, and there were lots of teachers dancing. I did not dance, I will admit. I watched and I took some video, and it was great. But it was a really, really nice, it was just really nice to actually be in the classrooms and seeing such great stuff going on. I was very proud. I actually sent one of my friends. I was like, just take a look at what's happening at Jefferson High School today, because I was so proud. So anyway, that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Casey, AFT Local 1481 report.
Hello. I don't have much to say today. I've been working for about 2 weeks on negotiations, and we haven't started working with the district yet, but we will be sunshining our proposal soon. So we've just been working on that. It's been like combing through the contracts, which is heavy work, and I really appreciate my team. We have classified and certificated. I think we have every site represented in some way, shape, or form. And even, for example, one of our substitutes is representing the substitutes, but she also worked at Terra Nova and is retired from Terra Nova, so she brings a lot to the table for that. So, everybody brings a little bit of extra. So that team is really appreciated, and we've just been diving into those contracts, which is a lot. So it's going to be fun. Lots to do because we have a 3-year contract that we have to deal with. So it's going to be a while. I'll be working on that and talking about that. Of course, going to the sites is always fabulous. Gets us out of our office and our 4 walls and being out and seeing some of the students at their sites. Or, for example, I was at Westmore the other day, and Jefferson's volleyball team came over, and to recognize students, it's, that's the part about this job that I don't love is not being with the students, but at least when I start to see them often and I recognize them on their sites, it's really wonderful. So I really encourage all of us to make it to the sites. That's why Tony and I are doing that every week, if not more. So that's all. Thank you.
For a COVID-19 response update, Director Jones.
So I am pleased to let the board know that individual PCR testing began today in the district, and will be continuing on every day this week and weekly at each site. Mondays, they will be running from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. daily, and initially we are testing staff. Mondays, the testing will happen at Oceana, Tuesdays at Jefferson, Wednesdays at Westmore, Thursdays at Terra Nova, Friday mornings will be at Thornton, and Friday afternoon will be the adult school and district office. So I'm very, very excited about that. It's taken a lot of work to really pull that together, and it's happening, and our testing staff is wonderful. The number of COVID positive cases is trending downward for September, so that's some more good news. We started out with a high of 8 cases the first week of September, and the last 2 weeks we had 2 cases district-wide, so that's some more good news. Emails were sent yesterday to all staff who are either unvaccinated, have not provided proof of vaccination, or have chosen not to disclose their vaccination status, to remind them that testing is mandatory beginning 10/15. And there were 105 people who received those emails. So that's my update.
Thank you. Move on to the consent agenda items. Let's see, so before we vote on that, I'd like to acknowledge that we have two personnel who are retiring. Vivian Rigsby from Terra Nova. She's been employed since 1986. I'm sorry?
Westmore.
Oh, it says Terra Nova here. So she's at Westmore now?
Was it TN?
She was at TN, okay. And then John Meyer at Jefferson, who first started there in 1981. So I just want to thank them for their dedication and service. So let's see, can we get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Have any public comment?
We do have one public comment tonight. They would like to speak on the agenda for ethnic studies. Would you like to take the public comment right now, or would you like to take it when the item comes up?
When the item comes up.
Okay.
Which is?
No.
All right. So we will take the public, sorry, I couldn't find where it was going to be, so. So just to address the.
Do we want to do it after the presentation?
Do we normally do it after the presentation?
Yes.
I can't remember. Okay, so why don't we have, so the community responsive education presentation, Dr. Robinson? Yeah, I forget.
So I love when I get to do presentations like this. I get to just say, hi, everyone. It's great to see everyone. And now I present Dr. Allison Tintiago-Cubales, who is going to actually take you through the presentation this evening.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome.
I'm going to stand back. I can see that I'm on a big screen. I'm a little embarrassed. What's up to some of you I know? Hi, Nick. I'm really excited to be here, and thank you so much for to you all. It's so strange because I'm watching myself present this on the screen in front of you. I will try my best to get through this presentation pretty quick so that we can have a little bit of dialogue. I'd love to talk through some of these things with you all. What I'm going to cover today is a couple of things that I've covered with your teachers already. You know, we've only really been working with them for a couple of months. Actually, I think it's a little bit less than that, not even 2 months yet. And so what I'm going to be sharing today are some things that we've been covering in that space, and then also talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing in the future. This will probably be one of the only presentations where I'm presenting alone. I think in the future, I'll definitely bring in the teachers to be able to speak to their experience. I think that's really important. And then hopefully when it's being implemented, maybe we can have some youth speak. Yeah, I think right now, this is just an introduction to what we're doing. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. I'm hoping you can see it. Let's see if you can. Does that look okay? Okay. Also, let me know if you can't hear me. You know, we all think we're Zoom experts, but then we don't realize that people can't actually hear us. So please let me know if you can't hear me. Okay. So first off, congratulations, you all. Daly City is like wall-to-wall ethnic studies from elementary, middle to high school. And so I just want to say congratulations to all of you who made this happen. This would not have happened if the board did not support it. And so I just want to acknowledge you all for your leadership on this. I'll start off with the things that I always do in my work, in my teaching, and even in the space that we're creating with teachers. We do both a land and an ancestor acknowledgement. And this becomes really important because we don't really do this as symbolism. This is actually important to the work that we're doing. It is important to acknowledge that we are on a land where we were uninvited guests for many of us. So I'll give this land acknowledgement, and then I'll talk about some ancestors that we have recently lost. So I would like to begin by acknowledging the land, skies, waters, animals, people, native and earthbound, and those loving angels and creatures alive on this spiritual plane. I acknowledge that I am a settler, an uninvited guest on this land that provides our physical home and that sustains and nurtures our dreaming, thinking, learning, and creating. I am on a land stewarded by Muwekma Ohlone people, and I believe that they are still here. So a little bit about me, like I'm a professor at San Francisco State University, but before that, I was a student, a grad student. Before that, I was an undergrad student, but before all of that, I was a student at Ohlone College. And it's really important for me to acknowledge that as a community college student. And that's the place where I learned about ethnic studies. My first ethnic studies class was a Chicano studies class. And I was really very much taught from the very beginning that indigeneity is really key and that we really need to acknowledge that presence. And so for me, when I do this kind of land acknowledgement, it's not just to make a statement, it's actually a commitment to the kind of work that we need to do in our communities. So along with land acknowledgement, I also want to share some ancestors with you all. All of these people who you see on this screen, we have lost in the last few months, all of them leaders in ethnic studies. And so I come to you with a really heavy heart because their legacy was so large, but it also means that we have so much work to live up to that legacy and to continue what they have created. On the very top left, you'll see Elizabeth Betita Martinez. Some of you might be familiar with her. She died in her 90s a few months ago. And she was she was a leader in the Chicano movement. And her main focus was writing about Oppression Olympics and really pushing us to think about our solidarity with each other. So when I think about Elizabeth Betita Martinez, who happens to be someone who I feel like mentored me in some ways during some of my college years, I feel like I really want to uplift, the notion that she's all about solidarity. Next to her, you'll see Hanani K. Trask from Hawaii. And what's amazing about this professor, she was also a community activist. And so I really feel like that speaks to what I hope I can become and what the teachers can become is they're both teachers and also activists. She was very much about the sovereignty movement and indigeneity in Hawaii. And she fought fearlessly against colonizers and against people who were pretty much taking over their land. Right below Betita Martinez, you will see Bob Moses. Bob Moses was a freedom fighter. He was a civil rights activist. But what's really interesting about Bob Moses is he took ethnic studies out of ethnic studies. He combined ethnic studies with math. And so his famous project is the Algebra Project. Next to him, you'll see Janice Mirakatani. Some of you might be familiar because she's, definitely here from the Bay Area. She was a poet laureate twice. And she also was a co-founder with her husband, Cecil Williams. They co-founded the Glide Memorial Church. And they fed the hungry, they fed the vulnerable. And some of you might be familiar with that area in the Tenderloin and in the Fillmore of San Francisco. So the last person I'll mention on this slide is Terry Collins. And a lot of the people I already mentioned are pretty famous. Everyone knows them, like in ethnic studies, but this individual I think is also really important to mention. He was one of the founders of the Third World Liberation Front and was very involved up till recently, up until he passed away. And what I loved about Terry is that he always was about principles. And he would say, if you ain't got principles, you ain't got nothing, And so I think really important, that's what we do in ethnic studies is we're very, very principled about our work. I'll move on to the next slide, which unfortunately are not a bunch more ancestors. And these ones are specific to my campus at San Francisco State. Dr. Ananta Sugatar was one of our faculty members in Asian American Studies, and we lost her about a month ago. Hassani Bell, some of you might be familiar with Hassani. unfortunately was gunned down in Oakland. And he was one of our young, promising students who actually was part of a hunger strike to fight for ethnic studies. And then over here, Dr. Gwen Augustine, amazing, amazing person, a very close student of mine since she was an undergrad. I was also able to support her all the way through her doctorate. She recently passed away as well. And she served as a counselor that specifically focused on students of color at San Francisco State. So that's a mouthful. I know I just laid down a bunch of different ancestors, and you may think like, isn't this about ethnic studies? Isn't this a presentation about what we're doing in Jefferson Union? But for me, it's really important, to be able to share with you, this is what it is about. These ancestors have paved the path for us to be able to do this work. So our agenda quickly will be, I just did a cultural ritual, like really just kind of describing the land that we're on and then also acknowledging these ancestors. And now I'm going to talk about what CRE is. That'll be very quick. And then a little bit deeper into what is ethnic studies. And then I'm going to review some stuff that we've already done. And then review the scope of work that we have with your district. So CRE, if you're not familiar with us, is Community Responsive Education. We've been serving communities for almost 3 decades. And this group of people here are the founders, along with myself. I'm also working directly and been working directly with Jeff Duncan Andrade for decades, and then also Glenda Makatangay. And so what's interesting about the work that we do is we connect ethnic studies directly to wellness. So those are our 2 major projects in our organization. Along with us, we have 2 additional consultants who are working in your district. Kyle Beckham, he's currently teaching at UC Berkeley and at Stanford. And he's been working in ethnic studies for quite some time. We work together in San Francisco Unified to really develop the program there. And along with him, we have Art Nelson Concordia. Some of you might be familiar. He's a former Daly City resident. And he worked in San Francisco Unified for decades. And he is now over at Santa Barbara running the ethnic studies program there. So we brought to you a bunch of very experienced people in ethnic studies. And we're hoping that we continue this relationship even beyond this year. We do a bunch of things in CRE, but our focus with your district is ethnic studies teacher and curriculum development. So just to go right into what is ethnic studies. And I listening to you all talk about how excited you are about this presentation and then also excited about the work that's happening in your district, I feel like, wow, we're really in a great district to be able to do this work. So again, this is great. This is gratitude for that. So ethnic studies really comes out of protest and out of movement and the fight to actually teach education that is most relevant to students. Yuri Kochiyama, who is a leader in the movement, said, our ultimate objective is learning about anything. I'm sorry, let me repeat this. Our ultimate objective in learning about anything is to try to create and develop a more just society. And that really is central to what we're trying to do with your teachers is whatever they're trying to create in terms of curriculum, we really want to move towards a more just society. And I think you all mentioned, even in your opening comments, how can we make sure that what's happening in our communities is also what we're talking about in the classroom? So ethnic studies is history, but it's not just that. And that's what I'll describe today. You might be familiar. I think you voted on all of this, so you probably learned a little bit about ethnic studies in terms of it being rooted in a movement. Like people fought for this. So in 1968 to 69, there was this very long student strike at San Francisco State, and they fought for ethnic studies. Ethnic studies really thinking about this idea of an arc. So actually, this slide needs to actually be adjusted because it's access, retention, and community, but it's access, relevance, and community as well. So these are the world views of ethnic studies. Self-determination, critical consciousness, community actualization, solidarity and unity, and I added wellness and wholeness, and then hope, love, and respect. So I'm hoping you all can see here that this is definitely ethnic studies, but this can be in all subjects. these ideas can be rooted, like in ethnic studies and then also taught across the curriculum. So a couple of these slides, just so you know, I'm going to cover a little bit about what ethnic studies is. I'm not going to do a whole lecture on it. And then we're going to talk about what it looks like in your district. So ethnic studies is history. It centers experiences of Black, Indigenous, and people of color who are historically and also in the present experiencing dispossession, displacement, enslavement, exploitation, marginalization, and being silenced and disappeared. So ethnic studies is history that counters the harmful and dehumanizing narratives told by those in power. And many of the history books that the students get in their mainstream history courses do not provide narratives of people like many of us around the table. History that upholds people's humanity and the right to self-determination and freedom. Ethnic studies is also about criticality and critical consciousness. Thinking about causality, thinking about the root of our problems, thinking historically that everything has a history, and then thinking about systems and power so that we can destroy systems that actually are oppressive to people of color. Ethnic studies is knowledge with purpose. I mean, I'll read this here. What good is knowledge if it is not used to address our pressing issues? Ethnic studies calls upon everyone, so not just students in the classroom and not just the teachers, it calls upon everyone to bring their best selves in service of solving problems before us. It is really about humanity, it's about sustainability, it's about making real what we have yet to achieve and what our ancestors were not able to achieve. It's about love, life, and liberation. Ethnic studies is community. Too often we suffer in silence, alone, and in isolation, and we see that in our schools. There are high rates of suicide all over California. The way out from problems is both big and small, is through collective support and unified action based on principles that uphold the well-being of people, place, and the planet. We cannot do this alone. And so that's really important. I'll stress that over and over in the work that we do. So part of what that means is when we're working with your teachers, we're trying to develop community with them. It's not just an individual session where they're writing curriculum, they're actually developing themselves and their relationships to each other. And that's the kind of community that we're developing as an ethnic studies group. So you might be familiar with this if you went to San Francisco State or if you know about San Francisco State, but this is our rendition of ethnic studies. Ethnic studies provides safe academic spaces for all to learn the histories, cultures, and intellectual traditions of Native peoples and communities of color in the US in the first person, and I stress in the first person. And also practice theories of resistance and liberation to eliminate racism and other forms of oppression. I say that first person piece, and I'll pause to kind of go in a little bit. Like first person means stories by Black, Indigenous, and people of color. There are stories about us that oftentimes gets taught, but we really want the stories to be from people of color, and even better from Daly City, and from the community, and from the students, and from the teachers. So first person becomes really, really important in ethnic studies. The second thing I'll sort of stress in this definition is that ethnic studies should be about eliminating racism. We are not providing a surface multicultural curriculum. We really want people to actually think about the stories of people of color, ideally to move toward eliminating racism. So a study that was conducted on San Francisco Unified, based on the definition that we just described, showed that there's, attendance that it has improved 21%, grade point averages improved 1.4%, and then credits increased by 23%, which basically means students are more apt to go to college. So I'll say that ethnic studies matters because of these things. And a lot of districts have really bought into the fact that ethnic studies might improve academic achievement. But I want to also say that ethnic studies, based on what we just talked about, that wasn't the purpose. The purpose wasn't just to make sure that students do well in school. It's much more than that. It's building the students' capacity to become to learn more about who they are and to become more actualized. And I'll share a little bit about other things that ethnic studies is able to do. So along with academic achievement that we have now been seeing, and there's a couple new articles out on academic achievement, there's a bunch of other new research that is showing that reflective, relevant, and responsive curriculum and teaching really improves self-esteem, self-concept, and self-determination. Self-determination being one of the goals of ethnic studies, where students feel like that they can determine themselves in a positive way in their life. It also improves mental wellness, and these are some of the new studies out. Civic and community engagement. I mean, we want them to contribute back to Daly City. We want some of those people who are taking ethnic studies to be able to sit in some of the seats that you're all sitting in. And then commitment to cultural perpetuity. And what that basically means is it's a commitment to making sure that they keep alive their cultures that have been destroyed, marginalized, or silenced. There are also some benefits for your teachers. We've already seen some benefits. So there's an impact on teacher development. Teachers are more critically conscious, empathetic. They're more in solidarity with students. You can see that there's this culturally responsive and community responsive teaching happening in the classrooms. They focus on student strengths versus deficits. And many of them become more engaging when they become more passionate about what they're teaching. Okay. So just a few more things, and then we'll be able to take some questions. So just so you may or may not be familiar, and Lori, I don't know if this was shared earlier, but your teachers, before I even came on to work with them, they had a vision for ethnic studies. Was this already shared with this group? Oh, okay. So this is not an official vision. This is what was presented to me before I got there. And so I want to honor what your educators have already created. They said in their vision, we as educators envision a course of study that is focused on the idea of educating to liberate. We hope to build a curriculum that challenges historical systems of oppressions and establish community that reclaims agency and builds a sense of critical hope among our students. We envision that an ethnic studies curriculum becomes institutionalized in our district and a graduation requirement for all high school students. So this is what was created by your teachers. Again, actually I take it back. I did work with them a little bit last year when I wasn't in contract and supported their development around this vision a little bit. So, but then they showed me this before we started this contract with you all. And so in studying their vision, I found that they have a few things that they're really trying to pull through. Challenging historic systems of oppression, establishing community, and providing critical hope. What you'll see here, and I won't go over all of it, is when they present something, me and my staff come back with questions, lots and lots of questions, so that there's this dialogue between us around reflecting on what they're creating. And so we spend a lot of time really thinking about, is what you're creating ethnic studies? Can it really be implemented with students? Does it really address the issues that are happening on the ground in your communities? I won't show the vision Padlet right now, but they have been working on revising their vision. So the last session that we had, they were working on really like workshopping the vision so that it best reflects the group of people who are there now. We have about 10 teachers working with us right now. Lori's there all the time, so that's wonderful too. So I count her as maybe now we're 12, right? With our staff makes it 15. And so we're 15 around the table, really trying to develop an ethnic studies that is relevant to your community. So our scope of work is really to do a bunch of things. We already had our orientation with your teachers. Our goal is to really support them monthly with 2-hour sessions. They also have been meeting outside of those 2-hour sessions to prepare for those 2-hour sessions. So they meet all day. So they have an all-day PD day where they work and they read. So we have been giving them also readings and videos to watch so that they come prepared to our sessions. And they are amazing. Your teachers are so on top of it. There's 2 of them, Asra and Andrew, who are facilitating what's happening with the teachers during the daytime and that before they come to us. And they are such amazing facilitators. They've had some really important dialogue. And so when they get to us, they're ready to go. They're fully engaged. Let's see. Okay, and then we're also supporting high school leadership and admin to roll this out. We're continuing to meet with Lori and Karine and whoever else wants to meet with us. We're willing to talk through it with you all to ensure that we're not just creating this curriculum or doing this development in vain, that the district actually has a plan to roll it out in the future. So we are working through ethnic studies district development. We're hoping that that's something that we begin to do, especially after the end of this first year. So yeah, we do a lot of support meetings to make this happen. So far, this is what we've done. In August, we had a teacher curriculum development launch. We did an introduction to ethnic studies, a much longer version of what I've just already given you. In September, we just have gone over pedagogical ideas, community responsive pedagogy, and ethnic studies pedagogy. The teachers developed their personal teaching philosophies, and those teaching philosophies have now influenced a collective visioning of ethnic studies. When we come back, I see them in October, we will have a new version of their vision to share with them. And now the teachers are delving deep into doing autoethnographies about themselves on race and intuition. So that's where we're at right now. We're having the teachers go really deep into their own pedagogy, their own lives, so that when they actually teach it, they're not just teaching someone else's curriculum, they're really teaching what they believe in. So, okay, everybody, now I will take questions.
Mr. Archipinti?
Yeah, a lot actually. First of all, thank you for the presentation and obviously all the work that's gone into this. I do remember you as a professor at State and referencing your work in my capstone research and a lot of the work that's being done in the community. So when you're talking about how this and how ethnic studies should be relevant to our communities, it's important to me to see that reflected here, especially in Daly City. And so your input, of course, Art Concordia and everybody who's been a part of this, I think seeing that come to fruition in San Francisco with San Francisco Unified was really inspiring when I joined the board. At that moment, it was being passed in San Francisco. So to see here at this point is really empowering, and to know that our faculty and staff and our students are a part of that process is really empowering to hear from. I guess I have a lot to say about this in general. It's exciting, and I guess my first question would be, how is student input being fielded and heard, and how is it being integrated into, it looks like the course curriculum is definitely reflective of a lot of what I feel like I've heard from high school students in my experience as a high school teacher, but how is it being, I guess, fielded in our district? And maybe our student trustees will have some questions as well along those lines. But yeah, and how is that working with the faculty and staff, of course, who are in development of the curriculum right now?
Wonderful question, Nick. Thank you for that. And if you know me well enough, I'm all about the students. So right now we're working on teacher development. And what that means is really them talking about why they're teaching, what kind of ethnic studies teacher do they want to become? This next workshop is I'm really excited about it. This idea of really talking about race and intuition. A lot of people talk about implicit bias. That's not this workshop. This workshop really is talking about people's experiences with race. And so that's the next workshop. And then we're going to move into talking about curriculum, that we have not talked about developing curriculum yet. And when we start talking about developing curriculum, one of the assignments that they'll have, because every month they get an assignment, is to be able to do some, what I call TPAR. Some people use YPAR, Youth Participatory Action Research. But because we're doing curriculum development, it's TPAR, teachers doing research on their students. And so what we have them do is do some interviews with some focal students to ensure they understand what students want to see in this curriculum. And then that's how the input comes in. Ideally, that's one level where students come in. After they've created curriculum, we want to pilot and then also get student feedback, right? Like there's going to be particular junctures where we include that. So there's some before the curriculum gets implemented, and then of course, when the curriculum gets implemented. Right now, we're implementing, of course, you already know, at Jefferson Elementary School District. So the middle school teachers are implementing their curriculum, and their next step would be then to interview students to ensure that the curriculum is really working with those students. And that's what's great about teachers writing their own curriculum, is that they can go in, pilot it, and if there's something that they need to fix, they can fix it, the next time. And I'm really excited that that's the kind of model that you all are going to be having in your district. It's helpful in terms of including student input.
I did notice some of the curriculum too, for the proposed curriculum is aligned with the UC and sure the UCSU as well. Is a lot of the, is in your experience, is the development of ethnic studies at the university level, like how is it going to form the high school curriculum, and how will it be implemented differently? Because there are a lot of questions in terms of what course offerings are and what range of course offerings are, even just about ethnic studies in general. But can you speak a little bit about how the universities have already kind of done this development, of course yourself as a part of that at the university level?
I hope I get the question right, Nick. How does the curriculum at the university level impact the curriculum at the high school level? Okay. Okay, and I have a couple of answers for that. I think important that curriculum at the college level definitely influences it, right? Especially around the criticality of the work. You can really see, hopefully in the presentation that I just gave, that a lot of those concepts are heavy, even grad school concepts. But ideally, what we try to do is to make sure that we scaffold it so the students can really understand it from 9th grade to 12th grade. So that's the goal, is not to change the criticality of ethnic studies, but to make it accessible. And so that's the big shift from what happens at the university to the high school. Also important to note, and this is something that I'd love to talk to you all about, is I'm one of the instructors in the Step to College program at San Francisco State. If you're familiar with that old school program that was developed in the 70s, the idea was to give students college credit. And so if in fact we develop this curriculum, we want to think about that in the future. How can we create a curriculum that is maybe a junior and senior level curriculum at some point that students can also take for college credit. And so they would get concurrent enrollment with your district and also San Francisco State. So those are some ways that we connect it back to the university.
Right on, thank you.
Thank you for the questions.
Is that it?
For the presentation, my question was just so what's the projected timeline for the actual first year of where students will be able to have an ethnic studies class?
I think that depends on your district, Mustafa. I mean, for us, we know what our goal is. By the end of this year, we're hoping that there'll be a curriculum that they can pilot, at least at the semester level, ideally at the year level. So we're hoping by the end of the year that they will have something that they can pilot next year. But that there's some work that has to happen outside of our work, which is very much about teacher and curricular development. On your end or in your district's end, they need to start thinking about the game plan of implementation. Start talking to the principals now. Start making sure that they give teachers, like the support that they need, which means that they have to take out some classes from a teacher's schedule to actually fit this in. So there's a lot of work that has to happen that is not, I wouldn't know the answers to. All I know is that our goal is to have a curriculum ready for you all to implement, but implementation has to really happen in the discussions with your district.
And some of that's being supported by conversations that are happening at the state, that down the line, this will be a high school graduation requirement. So talking about it with the principals and the sites, and each one of our sites. So all of our high schools are involved with this group right now. So though there will be some autonomy at the sites about exactly how things look, every school will have it and all of that. Are you a senior? I forget. Oh, darn, man. I'm sorry. Hopefully you have a whole world of ethnic studies available to you in college experiences, but that's why we are trying to get it next year so that we can catch those groups.
Yes, Ms. Salahuddin.
So thank you so much. This is Kalima Salahuddin. Thank you so much for the presentation. I have a couple of questions. So my first question is, when we say develop the curriculum and have a class, like what does that mean? Like what is it? Is it going to be an all-encompassing ethnic studies class? Is it going to be?
So right now, I believe the group, I mean, they haven't started on curriculum yet, but it sounds like what they're leaning towards is to take the vision of what a singular class would be like at the 9th grade level.
Gotcha.
And that is not a stopping point, though. That is just a starting point. And that's just going into next year. I think that we've contracted to work at least 2 years with CRE, and so depending on what they're able to get done, what's going on. It also, a big part of this conversation is what does that look like being brought into the other classes, right? And the ethnic studies doesn't live in one place or one course code.
And that's really important to me. And so that was going to be my second question, was how is this going to inform other classes, right? Because as was brought up in the presentation, we are not working, we're trying our best, but we're not working with the best textbooks, best, references when we're talking about important people and specific different courses, like in math, who's brought up in math class, who's brought up in science class, et cetera. So are we going to have some assistance so that they're not getting counter messages depending on which classroom they're in?
Yeah, I will say that on our end, absolutely. One of the things, just speaking to that alignment, that I have to say is I just got to give a huge shout out to Usra, because she's not only one of the leads, along with Andrew Ombre, for ethnic studies, but she is also our lead for the district for the history social science learning area. And she is so great. She is such an amazing facilitator and teacher. And as we are finalizing a lot of our scope and sequence in history social science, we're going to actually be going through a textbook adoption because those books are very, very old. And I am so glad that it's happening after this, because I know that not only have we first gotten to dictate like what standards and skills they're going through in the history class that are more important than even some of the content that they're going through as a lens towards looking at a book adoption, but also with ethnic studies pedagogy and community responsiveness as they're looking towards an adoption. And also recognizing that no book is ever going to be fully community responsive, right? They didn't write that book in Daly City.
Right.
They didn't write that book in consultation with our students,
Right.
but at least having a resource that can serve as a touchstone for those things. And I'm hoping that that is, yes, something that can be expanded as we work in the other curricular areas.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And my last question is in terms of like the continuance of this work. And you talked about ASRA, and we're leaning heavily on ASRA. So my concern is always what happens if someone leaves, right? And I'm upset that we have to delve into that, but it is a reality of our school district that, staff leave. So how heavily are we leaning on the core group that came? Because we already, in the presentation, it was mentioned there are new people in the group, and I think, if I'm remembering, I think it's because we had folks leave. So is it able to stand alone? Can it withstand, especially in these early stages, like a key member leaving? Like what are the contingency plans?
Well, I mean, if I had the answer to that one, I mean, that's unfortunately my heartbreak of my life's dedication to this district is how unsustainable certain things are because of the turnover. But I will say that it is a larger group now that is very committed. The work Allison did with them in just even the last session, I heard Joel talk about it being healing after that meeting. And so, I mean, when you think about just even like when we talk about teacher retention, that it is about a lot of those elements as well, being seen, being a part of this group, having something that, creates such a lasting impact in the school fabric. I attend every single one of the meetings. Ms. Baca is heavily involved. We're all praying that we can keep her around every day. I say a little prayer before I go to bed. And so, as many stakeholders as possible, and that's really why we're doing this at a district level and allowing some site autonomy, is that I want this to live in a system. And that's, I am leaning really heavily on Nasra I have her, and I'm hoping that also something like this, and with Andrew as well, makes them feel validated in all of their hard work and appreciated and helps their retention efforts, because affinity groups comes up quite frequently for our teachers as something that would really help retention. And I think that this isn't like a perfect affinity group, but it's at least the start for like also the basis of one.
And then we don't have to answer this today, but I know, like, presentation, funding always stands out to me. And I know this is like the 2-year model, but this is going to be an ongoing thing, and that there's going to be funding attached to it. So just getting some ideas. Like, I know we've accounted for the funding for like the 2-year start, but some ideas of, 3-year start. But is there, that's just what we think right now. Once we get a better idea of curriculum, like, is there going to be increased need? What do we need to do to keep it moving forward and expand and grow? It would just be good to get some ideas on that. It doesn't have to be tonight, but just
just like everything else, in the LCAP, we do discuss what the priorities are for the district. And I know that ethnic studies has been a priority and will be a priority. And so we will put, funds to our priorities.
Yeah, I know we'll fund. Just how much? Like, it'd be good to get ideas of like what a robust program is going to cost, especially in staff, and being able to staff and support, to have support, proper support. So those are all of my questions, comments. Thank you.
Mr. Lee?
Yeah, just maybe it might be a question, but start off with the comment. I'm heartened to hear the discussion related to the space needed for our educators to really work with this, to really wrestle with the issues. Because I know that's something we've certainly talked about here as a board when we've been talking about equity over the past now, 2 or 3 years. So I'm heartened by it. So does that work then? Is that why that the statement of we hope to have a curriculum, is that where it comes out of? Is that making sure that the heart of the teachers and the educators is ready? Is that what it is? I mean, because it sounded, we would like to see the curriculum, obviously, we all do. But is the thing that could potentially hold it back because we systemically and from a heart perspective are not ready? Is that what it is?
That's the question for me. So I think important that timing is interesting, right? And having been doing this work for a couple decades now with many districts, including San Francisco, writing a curriculum is not easy. And when some people will say curriculum is your scope and sequence for 4 units, we'll probably have that. I don't doubt that we're going to have that for you all, but a curriculum also requires daily lessons. It requires materials. It requires resources, not resources necessarily in terms of money, but like materials that they'll be using. So there's a lot involved. So sure, we'll have an outline for you, right? Like, I think that that's probably going to happen at the end of the year. But why I have that pause around, like, we hope to have a curriculum. Curriculum is more than just that. And I say that from the experience. And I also will say, working in San Francisco Unified, our first year, we did have a curriculum. We tested it that year, and some of it stayed. Some of it did not work. Some of it was too ambitious for a semester. So curriculum is something that kind of happens over time. I'm speaking more out of having experienced this process quite a bit. I have very great faith in your teachers and their ability to be able to write an outline for a course. And you heard why I say it's more than that.
I think that was sort of the thing I was wrestling with and wanting to make sure I understood what it was that, and what we need to get to, and I appreciate that level of honesty. Thank you.
Oh, Ms. Wazana?
So wait, I guess this is more of a clarification, but are the teachers that are already present at our school and they're being trained so that they're qualified to teach the course, or?
Well, just so that we have a common vision and like understanding, and then developing curriculum in which to teach that course. So yeah, like a readiness to teach the course, definitely.
And they're helping to create the course, really.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question? Okay, Ms. Garrett?
Thank you for the presentation. I just have a couple questions. So is the curriculum more going to be a guideline for the schools, or is it going to be something that is like set for all the schools, kind of like at the same level? Because for me, the concern is not really concern, but every school is different, right? So everybody kind of runs their own, runs at their own, Jefferson runs different than Westmore. So would it be more of a guideline of, here's the guide of how you would be able to customize it to your school? Because certainly Thornton, I'm assuming there would be ethnic studies there, then how would that be implemented at that school too, right? So is it more like kind of like, well, here are the main things that we do want to teach, and then the rest is kind of like customizing it to the school and the students that are there, because every school is differently diverse and learn differently, right? So I guess that would be just my question for that.
I love that question, Carla, because to be responsive, you really need to know the context of the students. And so ideally that we provide scope and sequence for some units for the teachers, but because there is no ethnic studies textbook, there's no set materials, what we do alongside providing a scope and sequence is to provide sample lessons. And then the teachers then can customize it from that point. We're facing that right now at the middle school. And it really just depends on who's in your classroom, especially when you say you want to include first-person stories of the students in your class. So that might require a different kind of pedagogy. That might require different kinds of assignments, like oral history assignments versus a book report, And so I think important that, yes, we're going to be providing as much material for the teachers who are going to be teaching ethnic studies, but they need to be instructed and trained to be able to customize it. It just, again, that's the goal, is to customize it.
The freedom and the flexibility to be able to see the students and be able to, I guess, acknowledge their ethnicity and also validate, where they're coming from. So I would hope that there would be that flexibility there for them, for each class anyway. So thank you, I appreciate it.
So much. I actually think that what's interesting about the middle school curriculum is that they'll have broad ideas like solidarity. And then here's 3 different examples. Decide what you want to teach. What works best for your class. And it may not be those 3, right? So then the teacher has to go in and do more research and try to figure that out. But without any of those sample lessons, teachers often feel lost, even if you give them a course outline. So.
Much.
Mr. Ochipinti, did you have your hand up?
I was just going to follow up on one of the questions. It was a good question. I know one of the issues that was brought up in terms of the model curriculum at the state level was also in terms of what the timeline was for approval of the requirement for the universities and the colleges. Can you provide any insight in terms of what kind of training the universities will be providing for those who are currently teaching in our high schools but do not have a background in ethnic studies, and what kind of professional development will we be looking for in those who are applying for those jobs? Should we have turnover or not? Certainly teachers want to be prepared and of course trained in the area. And so what kind of expertise Do you anticipate being needed or even that's being provided?
I would say at 2 levels, Nick, and it's related to what Carla's saying in terms of customization. I think that you should have some things that are happening directly in your district to be able to support teachers. So you need to think about, if as a board, need to think about some funding to support the development of your teachers, especially if you're going to implement a requirement or you're going to have multiple teachers per school teach it. You can't just throw a teacher who has a credential in social science and assume that they can teach ethnic studies. Or let me just put another out there. You can't just assume that a person of color or a teacher of color can teach this just because they're a person of color. So they do need support. They do need that time. So that's a district thing that you want to be able to think about. What kind of support do we want to give the teachers in Daly City? If you now thinking about your relationship, not just to SF State, but I was just speaking on a panel right before this in Santa Cruz County, and they were asking a very similar question. So there are a couple things happening behind the scenes and also maybe at the forefront. So behind the scenes, we are talking about an ethnic studies credential at the state level. So we're having conversations with CTC about it. We're organizing around it. A bunch of us at the CSU who do teacher development, teacher education, we're really trying to come around that because it is not the same as teaching social science. I want to stress that, right? Like, so the need for a credential is, yes, we need one, but you all know how long that's going to take, right? The requirement is actually going to probably take us about a decade before it really hits the state level. You could come with a requirement as a district much faster than the state can actually create a requirement for ethnic studies. So to get a credential, you need the requirement. So it's all related to each other. And that's hard. The other piece, though, I will say that's happening in the front of everybody, which you can actually tell your teachers now, they can get an ethnic studies certificate at San Francisco State. If they have a bachelor's, if they have a credential, they can go, they don't need a credential. They can just get a bachelor's and get a certificate in ethnic studies. So that can support their development. In Jefferson Elementary, we had 4 teachers in that first group who did it. So they actually did a couple of things for themselves. They got an ethnic studies certificate, and it also helped them with them moving up on the pay scale because they got units. So there's a lot of benefit to really support those teachers. And then lastly, I will say that we are having discussions across the CSU to think about what can we do to have specified programs in teacher ed in partnership with ethnic studies so that we can support teachers to do this. I think sometimes people jump to get the requirement out, but your question is actually really important. How do we make sure that if we have this requirement that there are teachers who can teach it? What we're giving your teachers in Daly City is a very specified curriculum to develop them as ethnic studies teachers. So not only are we asking them to write curriculum, but we're really going deep and trying to develop them as ethnic studies educators.
For that.
Because it'll really expand the lives of our students in Daly City and Pacifica, and Colma and Brisbane. So what I do like is that you're developing the curriculum from within. And because I'm always worried about buy-in. I'm always worried about buy-in. And of course, that the group of teachers who are working on this now are passionate about it. And they're probably going to be the ones who will be teaching it, correct? But as Dr. Robinson said, and what we've always said on the board is that, ethnic studies doesn't live in one place, is how you put it, Dr. Robinson. And we fully believe that. We want this to be the heart of every class. And because exactly for what you said. And I will admit, I did not fully understand what ethnic studies is. And just because I'm a person of color, I thought, oh yeah, I'm sure I can understand it. because I have a lived experience, well, I really don't. And now I want it even more because I never took any classes at SF State. And I really want this for our community. But what I know it's further down the road, but how do we get buy-in from all instructors if we're going to make this a culture? You know, there are some who will not want to, who are not going to understand it or see what's the big deal.
So I'll just say, as you know, I think this started my 15th year in the district this year, and probably like my 10th year in doing like district-wide initiative work in my various roles. And I think of it sort of like this bus route that we just keep running. And if we don't pick you up on the first time, you know, like we're just going to keep running that route, and we are going to get you on eventually, because, you know, I quoted it today. I forget what Kareen and I were talking about, but like, you know, part of it is working with this small coalition of people that are passionate and letting that passion infuse things. Because if we just force this on people, I really, you know, resonate with what Allison said about, like, you know, you make the requirement, that doesn't do you good if you haven't changed people's hearts and spoken to those hearts. Because like the quote I gave to Ms. Baca today was, you know, if we take away no, then yes means nothing, right? You know, and we want this yes to be meaningful when we get teachers to this work. But we have to start somewhere. And, you know, I was at the Grading for Equity training this morning, and I was talking to a few teachers from Jefferson that actually mentioned that they were there today because of something Jason Brockmeyer had them read nearly 7 years ago. And you could sit there and you could say, wow, he was a principal a really long time ago, and that took so long to get this person here. But that is how lasting cultural change, I believe, like happens in the district. Is sometimes it doesn't happen on the timelines we want it to, but we keep moving forward. And like I said, we keep running the bus around because they might not get on this time, but they might the next go around. And that's what I'm hoping to do here and getting it started this way.
And just quickly too, you know, like one of the reasons why I'm involved in education is, one, how much it's done for me, and another is how much it hasn't done for me, right? I mean, that's kind of why I'm here. And so I think that I don't know any person who works here in JUHSD that is okay with not reaching a student, you know, and it may not be. So I think getting them to understand through the data, through the stories, et cetera, what it feels like to be able to walk into your school and learn about yourself, having never been able to do that before. And I was very blessed that I had parents that knew the importance of that, and so they put me in a private school, you know, K-6, so it was a private school that was surrounded, you know, the African diaspora, and so I was really educated about myself. And I remember when I came to public school the first time, my mind was blown. I was like, this, you know, like, wow, like, complete difference. And not only who was teaching me, but what I was being taught, and then how that reflected in expectation. So I feel like we have to be really good stewards of the story of the why, and that's part of our responsibility as a board, to really talk about the story of the why this is really critical and important, and why we're taking up this work, because it helps fulfill the mission of the reason why we're all here. And then I had one more question about, I'm very happy that JESD is ahead of us and has started this work. And so I'm just wondering about the collaborative efforts between our two districts and making, you know, and especially in developing of the curriculum.
I'm excited about that too. We're not at that place yet. I definitely think I'd like to bring everyone together at the end of the school year to share the development of all the pieces. We have the middle school piece ready. It's piloting right now. The elementary school piece, we're just starting. You're on the same timeline as the elementary schools. So at the end of the school year, I'm really excited to have them all connect with each other. Kalima, I'd love to meet your parents.
I would love for you to meet my mom. My mom is still with us.
Your mom.
She had the dope birthday party.
She's inspiring because you're saying that your parents taught you, you know, luckily, right? I happen to know your sister. I don't know if your sister's working with me on another project, but so I'm just like, wow, what did that family do? Because there are families in your district who are doing this too. I'm noticing more and more the students in Jefferson Union, but also Jefferson Elementary, they're coming in with this excitement about ethnic studies. The middle schoolers, I'm like, wow, like the middle schools are really into it. Like they really are excited to learn about not just who they are, but about all these concepts, you know, that they can use in their other classes. So anyhow, yeah, maybe one day I get to meet your mom.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. Oh, Mr. Abuzarea.
So I know you said like CRE isn't really like an implicit bias training. It's like not really necessarily focused on that, but maybe this would be like more of a question for Dr. Robinson. Like, are there any plans to have teachers like undergo an implicit bias training, like just so they're like aware of any biases they may have and how that could potentially affect their teaching of ethnic studies?
Yeah, we've been working with a group called Circle Up to work on some of that with us. It's kind of a catch-all term, this implicit bias, because I think, and perhaps Dr. Tintiago Cubales could speak more to this, but I know some of the recent research on implicit bias training has said that it's kind of this counterintuitive thing because we literally can't unbias ourselves. It's like hardwired into us to have certain biases. What's really kind of the important part is like looking at like what they are, developing that self-awareness and developing like the communication skills and the self-reflective tools to be able to really work on being more conscious of like action. And so that's sort of what Circle Up is serving for our teachers right now. But they're working with all 5 of our high schools. And so, and they are working on culture and school culture and staff culture. And it is, it's hard, slow work. I will say that. Yeah, most definitely.
I can say a little bit about it. I just worked with a student who did their dissertation on rethinking implicit bias. And so, Lori, you're right on. A lot of times implicit bias focuses on white teachers. There's a lot of non-white teachers in your district who need support in terms of understanding their relationship to race. And so what we're providing your ethnic studies teachers is even, I think, deeper than implicit bias work, which is looking into racial intuition. And so I'll say that we're trying with this particular group. If Circle Up is doing some great work around culture, I think that that's great. Implicit bias also has become very trendy in a lot of districts. People feel like if you can take a workshop on implicit bias that you're not racist anymore, which is really problematic. So we can talk more about this, and I'd love to like help you connect you with other kinds of organizations who are doing work to really address the issues of racism, which is different than dealing with implicit bias. I hope that helps, Mustafa. I didn't.
Yeah, thank you.
Say thank you. This is Tony Prest. I am the superintendent, and we have never met, and I've heard such wonderful things about the work that you guys are doing together. And I think that our concern that we've heard throughout this night is, you know, how do we make sure this happens? How do we get everybody to, you know? And I think that the evidence is really clear that we all will make this happen, because in all levels, in all aspects of our school district, we have very committed people who believe strongly in this. And so I'm thrilled at the work that you guys have been doing and begun. And I was texting Ms. Robinson saying, Dr. Robinson saying, when's the next meeting? And then I looked it up and I was like, okay, October 19th, I'm popping in. So I'm just really, really grateful for the work that that's going on. And, you know, just wanted to say that. No questions, but really great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you
very much. Thank you.
Extremely grateful to you and all of the staff working on this to
Yes.
make this happen. We're very, very
Absolutely.
grateful.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on to our next presentation.
Oh, I'd like to take the public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yes.
go
No,
right
no,
ahead.
It's okay.
Thank you for the reminder.
Oh, that's okay. I'd like to be respectful since they were waiting.
Yes.
So just to address the speaker. Are they on, Jake? Okay. Oh, they left? Okay, never mind. No more public comment for tonight.
Go right in. So item 12B, the Local Indicators Board presentation.
Good evening, President Tejada. Good evening, members of the board. So tonight, Ms. Robinson and I will be presenting on the local indicators. And so I will start. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to report on the local indicators that are available from 2021. Again, these are locally measured as opposed to the state measure that I will talk in a little bit about. So just as a reminder, there are two types of indicators. So there are the state indicators, and they are the data collected consistently across the state of California. These indicators are measured by different colors, blue being the highest and red being the lowest. Tonight, however, I'm going to be focusing on the local indicators, as these indicators are to be reported to the state of California by October 15th. And just as a reminder, there are 5 of them. There are basic conditions, implementation of academic standards, which Dr. Robinson will be talking about, parent engagement, school climate, and access to a broad course of study. And with this, there are no colors. The criteria will be whether you met it, not met it, or not met for 2 years. And to meet the criteria, the requirement is that I present the data to the Board of Trustees at a scheduled board meeting. So because I presented tonight, we would meet all the requirements. Yay. All right, so the first requirement is the basic conditions. So this is our priority 1 indicators. So it will ask about our missed assignments, if our teachers are appropriately assigned, also if our students have standard aligned instructional materials, and if our facilities are in good repair. So the data source from the missed assignments is from this new system called CalSAS. And with this, from 2021, we have 10 missed assignments, and they were in the areas of English language development, health, and also our former deans of students that we had, changed this year. From the school accountability report card, all of our students have access to standards aligned instructional materials, and also according to the facility inspection report or the FIT tool, all of our conditions are in good repair. So good for that part of it. The next part will be Dr. Robinson's part, so I will skip that, and I will have her come back when she comes back. So the other indicator is parent engagement. So we're specifically looking at 3 areas for parent engagement. Looking at building relationships, partnerships for student outcomes, and then seek input for decision making. So the data source for this is the version for parents of the California Healthy Kids Survey. So when the Healthy Kids Survey was administered in the spring, this was also given to our parents. And there were 3 specific questions that we've been measuring since 2017, 2018. And I just want to put an asterisk on, this data because, again, this is 2021 data during the pandemic. And this is when we're kind of trying to figure out, how are we doing hybrid? There's just a lot of stuff happening when this was administered. So based on this, one of the questions is, parents feel welcome to participate at this school. So 74% of them agree or strongly agree. The other question is, school encourages me to be an active partner with the school in educating my child. So 87% of our parents agree or strongly agree. And then for decision making, 78% of them said that school actively seeks the input of parents before making important decisions. So there were 312 participants. Again, we have about 4,000 students, and then we had sent this out to both parents, and we had 312 participants. So the participant rate is pretty low. I also want to bring something up because I looked at the data from 18-19 with the same question. And even though we can't really compare because of what was happening, for the first two questions, the percentage at that time and the percentage this time is very similar. It's like 1 to 2%. One area that seek input for decision making, in 18-19, it was actually 63%, and it's now at 78%. So one of my, I'm wondering if it's because of all of the COVID that was happening that we did, ask a lot of input on how, we can improve the schools. And I'm gonna go back because my twin for today, if you see us, we're
services thing.
She's the better me. So,
yeah, right.
Implementation of state standards.
All right, so I'm going to get through this as quickly as possible because though it be one slide, there are 10 subjects up here, and I'd like to just give you a brief overview of each. The first one, I'm going to start out with English, and that actually dovetails really nicely into the last presentation because, as you know, the scope and sequence has been finished for that for quite some time. We're in the maintenance phase. We're really just like always taking revisions. We'll never be done. But one of the things that we're doing constantly with this is and I've changed it since we started partnering with CRE, to the community responsive novel project that we've been doing for the last couple of years. And we've adopted quite a few novels, and I'm pleased to say that in January, I believe, we'll be bringing some students and a few teachers to come and talk to you, in addition to student surveys that we are giving out about the newly adopted books now. And they just came out. I will give you just one brief anecdotal one. One of the books we adopted, The Patron Saints of Nothing, which is by Randy Rebay, who's actually a Filipino gentleman who lives in the Bay Area and wrote this book about a student that was born in the Philippines and moves to the United States, going back to visit the Philippines. There were all the teachers that started the book told me that kids came back and they were just like, this is the first book I've ever finished in high school. And, or I actually read this. Mr. Morrison, I actually read it, right? That's when you know you have a winner. So anyway, that's something to look forward to that we've been working on there. English language development, we've been working on it's actually the same program that houses our Constructing Meaning that we work on with all teachers. They have something specifically for newcomers called Systematic ELD, and they are currently working on bringing that into their classrooms, implementing that. Math, Ms. Chris, and by the way, shout outs to Lisa Rubin for both areas that I just mentioned. Moving into math, and shout out to Kristen Ashford, who continues to do an amazing job with our math implementation, and they're really looking forward right now to the data science class that's coming down the pipe from Jo Bowler and her work that is going to be an alternative actually for students taking Math Course 3. To still be A through G college prep for math. So she'll have more updates for you on that eventually. Next generation science standards, slow and steady with that one. We have biology, chemistry, just kind of working on continuing to implement those next generation science standards. Social science, I gave you a little bit of an update about previously. We're really rounding out government and econ, and then we'll be going into a textbook adoption. It's similar to some of these other things. Denise Shreve is really going to be coming and giving you a better presentation about career technical education, so I won't go too in-depth on that one right now, only that all courses have a capstone project currently, and they continue to just do amazing work. We are very fortunate to have Denise, and it is her birthday today, so shout out to Denise on that. Health, Denise was also taking care of health, but we found Lisa Raskin at Westmore is actually taking over helping us be the health lead, and she is working a lot on the CRIM, the community resiliency model, and really having the health teachers be stewards for that in our school systems, keep that program alive. But the framework is really deep, and their collaboration is great in the health department. Physical education, has gone through its ups and downs. We've had years where we can focus more on the framework and standards, years where it's been conversations a little bit more just about facilities and things of that nature. But it is led by wonderful Miss Bossuino, and I believe she's meeting with them later this week, and we're hoping actually that a lot of last year, the physical education teachers along with CET teachers and VAPA teachers actually probably had to do the most reimagining of what their subject areas were going to look like in this distance learning context. So they've really been through it. We're hoping this year to really come out of that with a greater focus on more of a framework discussion. Visual and performing arts, again, a group of teachers that was really thrown off a lot by the pandemic. We were really charging strong. The county actually did a strategic plan for the county that Graciela Latte from Westmore was a part of, and she really wanted to bring that back and bring that into the school system. And then COVID hit, and they were completely distracted of like, how do you do painting across a Zoom screen, right? And all of that. So we're hoping to get back into this work this year, but we were off to a great start. World language is also great, led by Leah Anderson and Alex Mullen. They are actually in the middle of a textbook adoption because they've come so far on their scope and sequence. So that was the quick 30-second take on a bunch of subjects, but there you go.
All right. Next indicator is the school climate. So this is from the California Healthy Kids survey. And there were about 50% participants, both from grades 9 and grades 11. So again, this was, during hybrid instruction. And below are the tables of percentages per school participation. So with
Can
this,
you remind us again why it's grades 9 and 11? Just how they do it.
it's just the way
How they
it
do it.
has been. Actually, the recommended, I think, for this is only like 1 grade level. However, what we wanted to do was we wanted to see how they answered in grade 9, and then a couple of years later, has there been any improvements? And so that's one of the reasons why we decided to do, for 2 grade levels. So this is a very interesting chart because it could be really, really confusing. So the California Healthy Kids Survey had a module specifically for school climate. And then within that module, they have a whole bunch of questions that are aligned to these main areas. So student learning environment, learning engagement climate, fairness. But how to read that is that it's a positive thing. Like I have a positive student learning environment. So 63% of the 9th graders said that they have a positive learning environment. There are 2 questions, however, that it's better to disagree than agree. And the 2 questions are the racial and ethnic conflict. So essentially it's like there is a racial or ethnic conflict happening at my school. So because, it's only 9% agree that there is, racial or ethnic conflict happening at their school site. The other area is disciplinary harshness. So basically saying that, students get in trouble for the littlest things, do you agree or disagree? So answering more of the negative part is a good thing. So with this, when I look at this, I looked at all of the questions, and I just looked at the highest scoring one and the lowest scoring one overall, with the average. So the really good thing is the respect for diversity has been the highest one that our students feel like there, exists. So I want to give you some sample questions of what that meant. So students in the school respect each other's differences. Adults in the school respect differences in students. Teachers show that they think it is important for students of different races and cultures at this school to get along with each other. And finally, when there is a conflict between people, this school tries to make sure all sides are heard to help resolve the conflict. So this has been, the highest one that our students have felt, and this is consistent to what it was 2 years ago. The area, however, that we can improve on is learning engagement climate. So I want to give you some sample of what some of the questions were. Students at this school are motivated to learn, and that has been the lowest that I've seen in the responses. Students pay attention to class. students try their best in school, students turn in their homework on time. And so those were the questions, and also typically this area is something to really, work on and focus on with our, teachers and staff. And the last indicator is access to broad course of study, and how we measure that is our A through G rate. Again, this is, has an asterisk. This is class of 2020. We changed our grading policy. There's like the pass and no pass. And with this, 44.1% of our students met A through G, the class of 2020. And I want to give you a context of what it was the year before. It was 43.6 the year before, and it was 40.8 the year before that. So it's still pretty much remained steady. It may change, a little bit for next year because it's a full year of distance learning. And that is it.
Questions? Yes, Mr. Abuzaria.
Thank you for the presentation. I just have two questions. So first was for the learning and engagement content. Has it been consistently the lowest one in the past years as well, or is it
It's been consistent for the last year. That it's, something to, work on. And I know that with constructing meeting, one of our focus has been, creating student engagement. With the grading for equity, we're also looking at, how, will does homework have to count towards your grades? So those are the kinds of things that we are looking right now that is tied in with all of the work that we're doing for, like ethnic studies and everything else.
Thank you. And then my second question was for the administration of the survey. Was it just each school site was the recommended way to administer it, or was it just here's the survey that you need to send out and send it out?
So it varied from last year. I don't know if Ms. Best, we know.
Well, I can talk about it what we ask is each school site has somebody that oversees the survey and then speaks to whichever school sites, their juniors and freshmen who are going to be offering it. It's either through English or social studies or something to that effect. And so, but it could vary from each site. And then they're asked to they're given a class and then take the survey.
So I want to
Class time.
Like in the past, before COVID, what we had done was we tied this in with the Smarter Balance assessment. So when they're completed with their assessment, then they were asked to complete this.
How it was for Westmore last year, so I was just wondering how it was at other sites. Thank you.
Do we have any questions or comments here? Yes, Mr. Ochapinti?
Yeah, obviously it's a requirement to report these things, but thank you for presenting them. It's important to I think just see the responses, some of the questions I think from our student trustees is really helpful. Even just wondering, how the parents too, I know that the sample was about 312 parents. I don't know, is there any way to see if those are parents maybe multiple parents per household, or how many families engaged, or, and also, is that an increase or decrease from last year's parent engagement or previous years? Because due to COVID, there's a lot of things that have changed, but I'm curious how they were outreach too as well, and maybe how they engaged.
I don't know the exact percentage, but it was a decrease from when it was given in 18-19, because in 19-20 we did not administer this because that's when we just started the pandemic. I can give a context to the student, however. So the student ones in 18-19, there were about 80% participation rate. And again, now we're down to about 50%. So, I think this year will all, it'll be a better participation rate because last year we're, still trying to figure out how to do school.
And we had a really good discussion about this yesterday with the student trustees and the student advisory committee. And on this particular slide, I think it was you, Kathleen, that pointed out that the information on the bottom and that, engaged parents fill out the thing about engagement. I mean, that's kind of what happens. And so when you look at the numbers on the bottom, it does kind of reflect that there are people there that are not represented in the numbers that they should be. And that's an ongoing issue. So we had a really great discussion about that yesterday. And Yeah, again, I also want to thank everyone for the presentation. It's always good to have this information. I always really appreciate the data that comes from the California School Parent Survey. It's just one of the things that influences some of my thoughts and decision-making process. And and then it's hard to judge specifically off these numbers, like how do we move forward? But for A to G, I know now that we're starting going back, is there going to be, I know there was a focus on it before, but is it going to be an ongoing focus of increasing the percentage?
Yes, so it's an ongoing focus for us. I know that we will, receive a grant for A through G. But just as an example, 2 board meetings ago, we submitted courses of study for our newcomers, so our ELD classes are now A through G approved. So almost all of our CTE classes are A through G approved. So we are working on, getting all of our classes A through G approved.
And then I'm also hopeful that, with our ongoing with the ongoing work and hopeful implementation of ethnic studies, and then, as we broaden it out, as Ms. Robinson said, they read the book. I mean, and that's like half of the battle is, reading and being engagement, and which would help influence all of these other areas, as we saw with the data. So I'm hopeful that that's one of the steps that we can do, along with many other things, to continue to grow and improve our numbers. So it's nice to see that even through COVID, I mean, we still kind of held steady. So that's a testament to the work of what everyone did in the district. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Wonderful. On to the process for approval of board meeting minutes. That's me. So this has come up a few times. So I think that's why we put it on for discussion and direction at a board meeting, where how long do we give ourselves to accept? Because there have been a few times where Mr. Ochapinti has wanted to amend minutes, and we've accepted them, at that time, and then left it open to be amended at a later time. But how long should we give ourselves to do that before? Because it's really important to approve minutes. That is the record of the meeting. And so I think previous meeting, we had, for one set of minutes, we had, Mr. Ochapinti, we had said, can you give us changes by the 21st? And I don't believe any came. So can we give ourselves some time to maybe 2 weeks, or to possibly amend minutes, or should we just do it at that time? I think it's, I think it's customary that if you have changes to minutes or proposed changes, that you send them to me or Ms. Presta, and then we can make those changes and then present them at the meeting, or come with the proposed changes as we have at the meeting and have an open discussion, and then accept approve the minutes as amended. So for me, I prefer that. That if you want to change the minutes, let's just do it then when they come up for vote, and then we can approve them as amended. How do people feel about that? Do you feel that way?
Yep, I completely agree. That's what we've historically done over the years. And typically, there haven't been substantial changes. Usually
Right.
it's just a handful of words here and there, and we go through it pretty quickly. So I don't see a problem with it. I know from time to time, we might submit a change in advance, emailing the board president and the superintendent, which I think I've done maybe once or twice over the past 5 or 6 years. So, but typically, it is just an edit of some kind at the board meeting. So I would say we keep doing what we've done before.
Okay, do you agree to that?
I have a comment.
Yes.
Yeah, before agreeing to anything, I think this discussion is very welcome, so I appreciate this being on the agenda tonight. First thing I think about in terms of amending minutes is, and approval is, giving some format for recording the minutes, and I think that needs to be discussed in terms of guidance for our staff, so they understand what should or could or would be included in the minutes. So what I've seen is, and when I've asked for amendments, is discrepancies I've seen in how minutes have been recorded with respect to the content and the amount of content that's being recorded. So not to place any undue burden on our staff in terms of recording the entire minutes of videos that should be recorded on YouTube. And I would actually add that in addition to our regular board meetings, I will continue to encourage that our special meetings be recorded on YouTube, at the very least by audio, so that our public can access those even if they're not able to attend, especially during a pandemic when we have consideration of those who will be attending virtually or through teleconference. And so the recording of the minutes to me is the primary issue.
The written recording, you mean?
Yeah, because that would set a basis for how we approve or amend them. So to speak to it, Vice President Lee was saying, I don't know that we have a historical precedent in our district for that. I do know that formally or informally, that's what we've done. If there are minutes that we see that are missing something or something maybe was a typo, whatever it was, any of those edits, of course, we should take on. But what I've seen is if there are multiple parts of the minutes that look inconsistent with, say, an entire 2 or 3 hour meeting, for us to come through that meeting again and look for that and to match it up to the minutes, that creates a lot of time and work, not only for us as board members, but also for our staff. And so for me to ask for all these amendments, I think 2 weeks is reasonable, but I would say that we should have a discussion. The important part of the discussion should be about how we set, I guess, protocols for recording the minutes so that we don't have to have more extensive discussion about how we edit them.
Right, so minutes typically are supposed to just record votes, the discussion, what was set at the agenda, how people voted, what was decided, that kind of thing. That's the very basic that minutes have to, when the meeting started, when it adjourned, that's the basic. So, Ms. Presti, you wanted to?
Yeah, I think, actually, I appreciate you bringing this up, Trustee Achapinti. So because we have a new person doing the minutes, we've looked more closely at how we're doing the minutes. And, what it looks like, and I don't know several years back, I've just really looked at, this past year. It looks like we have been doing action minutes primarily, and that most of the time, there's not a real big synopsis of what was said, and oftentimes, it was a reference to, watch the video kind of thing, right? So I think that's what you're referring to. And Ms. Johnson and I were talking about, that's not really helpful when somebody's trying to look at the minutes, that's not really helpful to see what was said. We certainly, I would not recommend that we do lengthy verbatim, big, synopsis of everything. But I do think a line or two of the high points would, especially in the report section, that kind of thing, would be a good idea. So I would offer that suggestion out. Chelsea has just been doing them how they've been done because we knew we were going to be having this discussion. But I do think that it would be helpful for the public to see a short synopsis that is free of opinion, just, sort of factual, would be helpful. And so we've talked about doing that, and that might be a good idea, and I would like you guys to give us some direction.
I just wanted to say, I did read Mr. Warden's board meeting highlights, and that he did, kind of lightly did that. I read it, and they were great. So it was a nice little just, I was like, oh, anyway, it was funny because I was like, oh, this is what I said, but just a couple sentences. So I would agree with that, and I think that would be reasonable. And certainly, I personally wouldn't expect Ms. Johnson to write down exactly everything that's been happening for the whole duration of the meeting. But
and I'm thinking it would probably be a little bit less than what Mr. Warden writes, but along the same vein.
Yes. But I'm just giving an example.
Yeah.
It was. I just want to acknowledge that, and they were wonderful. So thank you.
So what do you think?
I like that.
Yeah?
I'm good with that.
Okay. And
So to go with what are we approving?
We're just discussing and how we want to do our minutes.
Still action
Yeah.
minutes. It's
Still
not,
action
you
minutes.
know, every detail, because I don't think that's necessarily helpful, but
Just in
a
like
little
doing a
more than
couple
has been given.
sentences, like a roundup of exactly what it was that, on the reporting
Not a
kind of thing. So she doesn't have to do
not a
exactly
detailed
what-
synopsis of
I like
what
it.
happened, just,
Couple sentences just to kind of drum up what was said overall.
If that makes sense for reporting, then that's fine with me, yeah.
okay, sounds good.
And then we had clarity on if we need to make amendments, the timeline on that.
Yes.
We're all good?
Yes, so it would be the day that we discuss it and approve.
Okay, sounds good.
On to action items. Ms. Lujan, 13A1, job description, Director of Student Activities.
Good evening, everyone. Before you this evening is a job description for a Director of Student Activities. This position currently exists within our district. We have teachers who fill this role and help students with clubs and student government. We just didn't have a job description, so our activities directors collaborated, came up with a job description. Administration and union both agree that this is representative of the position, and creating the job description, should we ever have to fill the position, will certainly help with finding the right person.
Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. 13B1, Ms. Basuino, Board Policy AR 5116, School Attendance Boundaries, our second reading.
Good evening, President Tejada, members of the board. So tonight, we have the second reading for Board Policy Administrative Regulation 5116, School Attendance Boundaries. I want to remind you, it's just being revised to include students living within the Bayshore Elementary School District attendance area and to guarantee their first choice of the 3 comprehensive high schools during enrollment due to their geographic isolation.
Great. Okay. Do we have a motion to approve?
Move to approve AR 5116.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Consideration of future agenda items, do we have any? Yes, Mr. Ochapinti?
Just tell who you want first.
Oh, okay. So I think we had the discussion about the minutes, but there are governance protocols, especially in pages 7 and 8 of the CSBA's, what every board member should know. It would be great. I don't know if we have our, we're going to reschedule our work study, but I think it would be great to just go over all of those and get the policy, a set policy for all of those things. And then the second item, I don't know if it needs to be a board discussion, but bringing it here, that there's a virtual, CSBA conference is virtual, and so on December 8th, having the student trustees attend that day.
We're already,
Okay,
we were already thinking that.
yeah, cool.
Great minds.
Thank you. That was it.
Yeah, just in consideration of, I think, the moment we're living in, and even just the discussion today, and the fact that it is Indigenous Peoples' Day next week, bringing to our consideration, I think, in light of even just recent consideration of our centennial celebration of our district, that we consider the renaming of our district and our flagship school, and that this be done, as we discussed around the centennial celebration in that subcommittee, perhaps with a subcommittee, or in concert really with our community and our larger district community. So I think that that should be an agenda item this semester, as soon as possible, given the timeline that we are approaching our centennial. Yeah.
Isn't any more? I'd like to, we adjourn tonight's meeting in honor of Tyrese Knox, Jefferson High School class of 1984 graduate, who passed away peacefully on August 31st, 2021. Tyrese was a standout basketball player, but he made his mark on the football field. leading Jefferson to a league championship and CCS championship in 1983. He went on to play 4 seasons for the University of Nebraska. In his high school career, he rushed for 5,217 yards, a state rushing record until 1997. He was inducted into the Daly City and Peninsula Sports Halls of Fame. Tyrese was a fierce competitor, but a gentle and humble human being. We, the Jefferson Union High School District Board of Trustees, send our condolences to the Knox family, along with their friends and host of loved ones. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Good night. 9:08.
All right.